Hi, welcome to the Propaganda Game. I'm Buzz Allen with the Accelerated Learning Foundation. And this video is for teachers who want to use the Propaganda Game online in class as a regular unit. What we'll be talking about today is 3 outlined lesson plans. The first one is how to introduce students to the actual game interface so that they can use it for homework at home. Also, a second outline for a 20-minute presentation of an overview of the techniques in a particular section. This is generally recommended to be done weekly. And third, how to conduct a multiplayer match in class. Experience from designing and playing the Propaganda Game shows that players learn the most when they find and create their own examples from the information that's available all around us. Anyone examining daily life for propaganda examples finds that their vision begins to expand, and they see that these techniques are not just found in politics and advertising, but they're present everywhere. Everywhere people are trying to influence each other's attitudes and behavior. Searching for and creating your own examples is the best way to master these techniques and recognize when they're being used on the fly as it's going down. This helps you respond to avoid being manipulated and also to avoid manipulating others. This is the experience we want to create for students. The teaching version of the game is designed to present concepts in class first, and then have students search and create their own examples as a homework assignment to prepare for playing a weekly in-class tournament. The teaching tools on the website easily allow teachers to review the examples submitted by students and select the best ones for the in-class multiplayer match. The online Propaganda Game also provides the perfect self-tutorial help for anyone who needs more practice while constructing their own examples. Now, this teaching version of the Propaganda Game uses the same system and PDF forms as the multiplayer game, so teachers should watch the video that was prepared on how to play the multiplayer game with online propaganda first before completing this, attempting to do it in class. The teacher should divide the class into groups with 4 to 6 players per group and equip them with score sheets, voting sheets, and definitions for the techniques. The teacher would then present the examples using the game interface on a single computer with a projector so everyone can see it. The examples in the match are drawn from those submitted by the students and selected by the teacher to create a custom match list for each week. So first, let's talk about how to introduce the online Propaganda Game to students. The very first thing that a teacher will want to do is to register as a member. And to do that, just go to propagandagame.org, click on Login, Sign Up, and this is the basic sign-up form for everyone who has to register to play. Fill this out. When students are doing this, we recommend that they use their regular school username, password, and email, and that avoids confusion and sign-on issues because teachers would have a record of that. And make sure that they all click on this button that says student, because this is the button that allows them to code examples to be later selected for match list by the teacher. But you as a teacher would just fill out with your username and password here and sign up. And then you would be a member. Here's an example of a member. This particular class has a bunch of superheroes in it, so Aquaman's account looks like this. In order to apply to become a teacher, a member would then go to Play Online and select Multiplayer. What then comes up is the application form to become a teacher. And this is just simply some contact information and background information so that we can better help you in using the game in your curriculum. Once you fill this out and submit it to us, we'll respond within 48 hours and assign you the status of a teacher. And to show how that looks when someone has become a teacher, we'll go to this another sign in. This is Wonder Woman, who is now a teacher, and you can see that by looking at the teacher's menu item that has now appeared. When you click on that, it goes to the teacher's options page, where everything that a teacher needs to manage the tournament is contained on this one page. So what you would then do, now that you have been approved as a teacher online, is have each of your students log in and fill in their own sign-up form. Remember, clicking on the student box to make sure that the coded examples will appear and you can use them when you play. So the next thing to do with students would be to spend a class session introducing them to the game phase. And if they do have tablets of their own, or you are in a computer lab, you can certainly have them experience this hands-on. It generally increases the learning. But it's not very complicated. One just has to show students first how you select examples to play a match, and then what the sequence is for reviewing the examples and voting. To do that, we go to Play Online and click on Single Player. This brings up the selection page. We're going to select the Selection Process button, which brings up the selection wheel. And this is how players can configure any particular match for the types of examples they want to see. First of all, on the outer part of the wheel are the 6 sections in the game, and each of these sections, self-deception, language, irrelevance, exploitation, form, and maneuver, have 8 to 10 techniques that are contained within that section. Generally, because of the number of techniques, it's best to introduce these sections one at a time. And we recommend starting with exploitation because many of those techniques are very understandable for students. We would then recommend doing irrelevance, language, and self-deception before going on to the more challenging sections of maneuver and form. In order to select a section for the type of examples you want to see, you simply click on the icon and that selects it. Now one can toggle between the author's version up here where the pearl is, the author's version or popular version for what will be considered the authority in settling challenges and ties in voting. Many people also like to click on the images because most of the more recent examples in the database are ones with have memes and images that tend to make it more interesting. One can also select various spheres and category areas like politics or media, and the subcategories of campaigns, policy, partisanship, advertising, literature, and reporting. Keep in mind that when one narrows down the search, one ends up with less examples. So students who were wanting to study examples from exploitation would just probably want to select exploitation and then maybe images to see more recent ones, and then click on the Ready button. This searches the database and gives you the option of playing a match with either 10, 20, or 30 examples. I'll choose 10. And now we're in the game interface where if we click on the Go button, it'll present the first example. And because we selected only section D here, you can see that section D is the only highlighted section for techniques. So when we click on Go, here's the example. We can click on a magnifying glass to see it. How many wolves have to die? Help stop the slaughter. So if we are curious about what techniques are in this section, we click on the D and it would show all the techniques that are in exploitation. If we want to see definitions for all the techniques, click on the pearl, go to exploitation, appeal to pity. This technique probably is appeal to pity. You can also, when you click on the pedals on the wheel and you see a check mark come up, you can see the actual definition for appeal to pity by just clicking on that check mark. In order to vote, one selects the activated section letter, which reveals all the techniques in that section on the pedals. Then click on the particular technique that we believe is the one we want to vote for, and then click on the vote button. This reveals the author's opinion. So this author agreed that this ad was an appeal to pity. If we want to see the author's explanation, we click on the comment section, and we'll often want to read this out to the class so that they can hear the author's explanation. Then, before going on to the next example, there's an opportunity to rate the example, and this can be done with a shout out in the class, just to click how many stars we feel it needs, click on rate, and then we're ready for the next example. We click go again, and here's another one. We can enlarge it. We can see the definitions of all the different techniques. We can click on the activated letter to see the various techniques here and select the most appropriate one we feel we want to vote with. When you're done with the game, you click on the Finish button and close the window down or go back to home. Now, the second thing that we want to teach students to do is how to submit their own examples. And to do that, from the home page, click on the Submissions menu item. And then here are the options. To create a new submission, click on the New Submission. Clicking on the author's life list will show all the examples that that particular author has submitted. And the Master Awards is our little award system for encouraging authors to submit an example of every technique in the game. So if we want students to make a new submission, we just click New Submission. And because Wonder Woman is the person signed in here, Wonder Woman and her email automatically appear. The first thing would be to select appropriate spheres, categories, sections, and techniques. Now, the example I'm going to use is an exploitation technique called an appeal to pity, and I have an actual advertisement from the Save the Child Foundation that is using this particular technique. So this sphere is reflection, or actually we could do media. It's advertising. It's we're doing exploitation as the section for this week. So, and I'm picking an appeal to pity. Often when a meme contains all the information for the example, we would just type see image in the example. If the example is just text, then this is where one would type the text. And here in the explanation section is where the author has a chance to explain why they believe this particular technique best suits this example. It's very important that the explanations be balanced and objective. Some of the examples, particularly with dealing with appeals to prejudice or other what can be objectionable behaviors in society, it's important that we objectively identify the technique in the explanation, and we don't endorse manipulative or abusive behavior. Doesn't matter whether the examples are controversial, but the explanation should not be. So here we'll say Save the Children uses a classic appeal to pity to raise money for children orphaned by the war in Syria. So this is my explanation. If there are secondary and tertiary techniques that are used in this example, I can put them in here. Just select them from the lists here. And now this is where I would drag the image into the database. And if I just have a JPEG or any other sort of image-based file, and I click on it and drag it in here, and boom. Here's the example. You can't bring Sana's daddy back, but you can give her a safe place to sleep tonight. Please donate to Save the Children. You can type in keywords: war, orphans. There's a section here for uploading video links, and since everybody's carrying a video camera in their phone, students can get creative in creating or acting out their own examples. And then here's where one it issues the code. And it's very important that the code be, first of all, a unique code, and we are encouraging a specific format. And the format we encourage is first the letter T for indicating teacher, and then a number. And each teacher, when they are approved, will be assigned a specific number to use for these codes. Next, C for class, and this is where the teacher can decide their own particular class number. I'll say class 4. Section D. Now, any letter after the S for section can be used, or mixture of letters. So once teachers have worked through the 6 sections of the game, A, B, C, D, E, F, they can combine letters from sections or make up new ones if they're branching out and doing customized mixtures of sections and multiple techniques. But the students have to enter this code in order for the teacher to see it on the list that she will then choose from in selecting the class examples for the class tournament. So then click Upload My Submission. The actual summary of the example appears here, and by default all submissions from students are initially unapproved. That's actually true for all submitted examples. Normally it is just the administrative staff at the Accelerated Learning Foundation that monitors and approves all the examples that come in, but because teachers have a time crunch in getting this done, we have allowed teachers to approve student submissions, and that easily allows them to enter them into the database and make them available for matches in the future. Now we come to an outline for each week. Perhaps early in the week on Monday, a teacher would just spend 20 minutes reviewing the new section of techniques, passing out a sheet that summarizes the definitions for all the techniques, and showing students an example of each technique from the database. So the way that works is a teacher would go to the Teachers section, and here are all the PDFs used in managing the tournament. There are voting sheets for the students to vote with, there's a score sheet for each group, and there are the technique definitions. The technique definition page is a single page with all of the techniques that appear in that section. So there's section A for self-deception, then there's language, irrelevance, and finally we're down to section D, which is techniques of exploitation. And this is the one we recommend starting with. First exploitation, then working backwards to C, irrelevance, B, language, self-deception, before tackling the more challenging concepts in form and maneuver. So you would just print this sheet out and on Monday morning hand this to each of the students, and then outline or exemplify all of the techniques that are used in that particular list. And to see that, go to Match List on the Teacher's Options page, And we can see here there are demo matches prepared for each of the 6 sections. So clicking on exploitation here with the play button, up comes the match. It's being loaded. We click on the play button here, go. Here we are with the first example coming up. It's an appeal to pity, help him live, from the St. Jude's Hospital Organization. And these examples will be appearing in the exact order that they appear on the list. So these have been carefully chosen to be very explicit and easily understood examples for students to watch. So these are available again on the match list page under demo examples, and can be called up anytime a teacher wants to show it to the class. Now, if students feel they need more practice on the examples, they can sign in at home and play and just select that particular section for examples and get some practice and ideas before they create their own examples. Just remember, it's very important that they all implement the unique code for that week's match. Now we'll go through and show how a teacher prepares a match list from the coded examples to run the actual tournament day with a multiplayer game in class with all the students. So for a teacher to run an in-class multiplayer propaganda game match using the online interface, the first thing that has to be done is to create a match list of examples from the examples that the students submitted as part of their homework assignment. So first log into propagandagame.org. If you're already approved as a teacher, click on Teachers. Here is where on the Teachers Options page one would enter the code that the students coded their examples with for that particular week's assignment. And remember the way this code works. The first letter is T for teacher with your unique teacher number. I'm teacher number 1. Then comes class number. I'm making this class 1. And then the section letter. I'm using G here because this is not this particular grouping of examples I created was not from the sections A through F. This was actually a exercise on gun control with memes from both sides of that issue, and it could use any potential technique from the whole game. So my code is T1C1SG. I would have given that to all the students along with the assignment, and they would have coded each of their examples with that code. So once I enter that code as a teacher and click on Student Examples, what then comes up is a list of all the examples coded with that code. If you had 20 students and you asked each of them to submit 3 examples, you'd have 60 examples here. So that would take up several pages, and you can click the pages here at the top to see other pages. So the first thing that must be done with these homework assignment examples is to examine each of them and either approve or do not approve them for inclusion in the database. This is the way you're essentially reviewing their homework. And it's very convenient and easy online. You just click on the ID number for the example comes up, and you can read the text, their explanation, and see an image if they included that as well. And at the bottom there's a box for approve. When we click approve, what this does is includes that example in the database that any players can then have access to. Now we have a fairly liberal policy with regard to what we will include in the database. Of course, we should not include anything lewd or pornographic, but many of the subjects dealt with in the game, racism, misogyny, abuse, these are controversial subjects, and it's okay if the examples that are found using propaganda techniques, in some cases to promote these less than desirable behaviors in society, it's okay if the examples are doing that. It's very important, however, that the explanation that the author gives is not an endorsement or seeking to promote racism or misogyny or abuse. And so if an author were to do that, then that is an example of something that we would not approve. Again, also something obviously in extremely poor taste in terms of being borderline pornographic or something as well. Students do know that you're going to be reviewing these examples, so that's a natural check on what they might submit. But the fact that a particular meme might be controversial or objectionable is not necessarily a reason not to approve it. It depends on how it's dealt with in the explanation. So in general, we'd be seeking to approve most of these. And then you just go right through the list. It wouldn't take very long to go through 50 or more. Again, just reading the example, the explanation. It doesn't matter whether the technique selected by the author is quote-unquote correct. Again, the author's opinion is just one of the votes that would be used to settle ties or bold challenges. But you're not failing to approve something simply because you disagree with the author. Many people will disagree over the particular techniques that may or may not be being used, and that's part of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and just approve 4 here. But let's assume I've worked my way through the entire selection of assignments, examples that were returned by the students coded with that code. So I've now approved all the ones that should be approved from that list, and the next thing to do is to go ahead and make up a match. There is a button at the bottom that default assigns the match with the same name as the code that was used to generate the examples, and that makes it convenient. You would then understand both the code and the class and sections. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then if we look at the match list, we see that now match T1C1SG has been created for the teacher Wonder Woman. There are no examples in it yet. If you go check your match list and want to go back to your assignment list of examples, you want to use the back arrow. If you click on teacher options, you'll have to re-enter the code. So I'm going to click on the back arrow. And now it's time, since I've created the match, to actually assign examples to this match. You'll see that there's now an Add To button next to each example, and there's a drop-down menu showing the various matches you might want to assign this example to. Many teachers will keep a super list of the very best examples that their students create, and this can be used either to generate a match for presentation purposes to other teachers at a conference or to parents on a parent night. And when you click Add To, it adds that example to the match. And I'll go ahead and do that for a few here. And then you see over here the match name, which in this case is the same as the code, that example has been assigned to. And if there's more than one, then you'd see more than one over here. If we go down to match list now, we see that these 4 ID numbers for the examples have been added to the match list. This match list is actually ready to go. If you click on play button here, it'll go right into the game, and it can be projected for the students on, for the match. But when you're preparing a match, you want to keep in mind that in a 45-minute period, probably if you're playing with a persuasion round, it's unlikely that you'll get through more than about a dozen or 10 to 15 matches, because not matches but examples, because keep in mind that you have to have an initial vote, which may take a minute, and then there needs to be a opportunity for the minority players, if there are any, to argue for their opinion, and then a second vote by the majority players before you then actually would reveal the author's choice. And so it could take 4 minutes or so for each example. So you want to prepare maybe somewhere between a dozen or 20 examples. Unlikely that you would be able to do more. If students want to go through more examples in the game, you can eliminate the persuasion round, in which case there's just simply an example shown, everybody votes, the majority players are all getting 10 points, unless there's a tie or a bold challenge, in which case the author's choice is consulted and that determines the result. And that you could get through many more examples. You could let your students decide which they enjoy doing more, but most people really enjoy doing the persuasion round, where they get to argue for their opinions, and that's where some of the more interesting learning occurs. And so again, that's where we'd aim for maybe 15 to 20 examples at most in a match list. So it may be that when you're going through assigning, you may choose more than would be a reasonable number, and you may want to edit this. So to edit the match list, you can click on the match list, name them, and then you see each of the examples in the match list come up with a remove button. Now, clicking the remove button just removes that example from the match list. It does not remove it from the coded list of assigned examples. That the code that codes an example to be part of an assignment list never changes. That's always there. It also doesn't remove it from being an approved example for the database. It just removes it from the match list. So if we've clicked the example number 5067, click the remove button. When we go back to the match list, we see whoops. Let's go back to this again. Go to the match list. Click on the match list thing. Click remove. It removes that one from the list here. And if we click on match list now, we see it also removes it from this match list. So this is how you can edit the match list in order to get exactly the examples in there that you want to use. This match is now ready to be queued up and played on the day of the actual multiplayer match in class. So what would be done there is to have a single computer and a projector, and to project this match for all the students. When we do that, we click on the play button. It brings up the interface, and this interface can be adjusted. And you see the match numbers that are in this match. You click play, click go, and the first one comes up. Now, the main task that a teacher has during the tournament day is to manage the examples and the time that the students spend in voting the various rounds of the match. So once they make the initial round of voting, and then if there are minority positions, they are argued for, and the second round of voting is done and ready to go, then you as a teacher will vote. And it doesn't matter what technique you pick, because you're just voting online in order to reveal the author's choice. So I'm going to click appeal to pity as a technique. Doesn't matter. The author's choice here is causal oversimplification for this particular example. Now, the one caveat we have in the multiplayer game in a classroom where the students have been submitted the examples that's different from the normal way the multiplayer game would be played is that one of the students in this class is actually the author of this example. And so that particular student, we have an additional rule that that student can't make a bold challenge because they already know what technique they picked for it. And the way we monitor that is after voting and revealing the author's choice, click on the comments section, and we see here it was Batgirl. This is the class of superheroes. Batgirl designed this particular example, so Batgirl's not allowed to make a bold challenge. And you can read out the author's explanation. Oftentimes students are interested in that, and have a voice vote for whether it was a great example or a stinker, and then hit rate, and you're ready to go for the next one. So this is how one would work through the examples, presenting them through the projector for all the students to work through. Now, as I mentioned, the multiplayer match in class is done with the same organizational scheme and scoring and whatnot that is used for the multiplayer match. And so you should look through in the teacher's options section. There are these videos for the multiplayer game and also for the teacher section that you're already watching. And watch the multiplayer match to see how the scoring works. That describes how you use the PDFs and the scoring system used in order to conduct it. These PDFs are available on the teacher option page. You should print them out. Now, when organizing the class, you'd want to pick groups of about 4 to 6 players in each group. You could also pick teams, and the teams could be one player from each group could comprise a team. The teams would be constant, not changing every week, and you could keep track of the cumulative scores of the players in each team and have a competition showing that each week on a sheet on the wall, and students get into that. But with the 4 to 6 players that are in each group, there will be one score sheet that will be used to keep track of the scoring, and that's described in that multiplayer video. Each player would have a voting sheet, which for each example has a place to do an initial vote and the final vote after the persuasion round. And each student should also have a technique sheet. We describe in the multiplayer match how it's good to start with section D, techniques of exploitation, because those are all very easily understood, and it's probably the easiest section and most intuitive one for people to begin with. We then recommend going to techniques of irrelevance, and then techniques of language, techniques of self-deception, and doing those 4 before going to the more challenging and technical techniques in techniques of form and techniques of maneuver. But in any case, each student would have a copy of this sheet to refer to when they were making their votes for what technique they believe is being used. So as we mentioned, the primary role you as a teacher have is not only presenting the examples, but also keeping things moving. If you run out of time to present all the examples, you can certainly terminate the online match a minute or 2 before the end of the period. But the main thing you can do to keep it moving, if there is a persuasion round, is to just call out as the example goes up. You say, okay, you now have a half a minute to cast your initial vote for the primary technique. And then after 30 seconds, say, everybody done? Now reveal your votes. Minority players have 2 minutes for persuasion. And then you can encourage brevity if people are being long-winded about that, and then say, okay, majority players now have 30 seconds to cast their final votes. Reveal your votes and score the match. Any ties or bold challenges? And you want to ask that because before revealing the author's choice, because the author's choice for the technique in that example will determine who wins the bold challenge, and it will settle any ties. So after you have revealed the author's choice and done a rate button, then you're on to the next example. And again, 10, 15 examples makes a good match when using the persuasion round. You could probably do double that or more if you were not doing a persuasion round. Now, once one has worked their way through all 6 sections. That's self-deception, language, irrelevance, exploitation, form, and maneuver. We might take a week for each one and just have students looking for examples for their assignments of just examples from that particular section. But once you've gone through that, then it can be more interesting because you can begin making assignments and have matches played using more than one section. So the number of possible techniques is expanding, and players are going to have to make more decisions about which is the dominant technique, because most natural examples often use more than one. And what you can do with your codes to indicate that, again, teacher 1, class 1, if I was going to do D, A, and C, that would be exploitation, self-deception, and irrelevance. That would be one way to indicate that. I would have to S for section, and then DAC. Or you can really put anything you want in here in terms of alphabetical or numerical things, as long as it's a unique code. It's also possible to create customized match lists. And that can be done by going to the match list section and creating a new match. Now you can give it a custom name, CUSTOM. I'm saying custom 2, and here you would type in the actual match ID numbers or example ID numbers that you want in this match. And you can find those by referring to previous signed examples that students submitted or that were used in previous matches. Or we also make it possible to search the database. Many teachers will just keep a Word file of interesting example ID numbers, and then you can just pick them and choose them as you wish. But you just type them in here, 5012. They should be comma delimited, so 5012 is one match, 5015, 5048. If I say create match at this point, now you see match custom 2 has these example numbers in it, and if I click the play button, a match will come up and present those. Again, this can be used for presentations and also creating very interesting matches from all the ones your students will be submitting. You can query the database to find examples, and clicking on that query the database button brings up a way for you to pick examples of just one particular technique if you wish. You can also further refine your query by reference to the content in terms of the spheres between relations, politics, media, and reflections, and the subcategories within them. Keep in mind that if you do use sphere and category content queries, that further limits the number of examples you may get in a particular query. But if we, for example, said I want to have examples with appeal to pity, and I'd like to see ones with images because my students find that more interesting, and I hit inquire, now what comes up is all the techniques, all the examples from the database that use the technique of an appeal to pity. And you can then see their numbers. You can review them by just clicking on that ID number, and you can then get an idea of which ones you might want to include in a special match that you create. So this really gives teachers a lot of power in terms of how you can, put together interesting matches from things you find in the database, matches examples that are submitted by your students. And this really is what makes this a very powerful tool, not only for your students, but also for making presentations to parents or other teachers. We hope that as you use this program with your students, you will stay in touch and let us know what your experiences are. Certainly if you have any questions or any anecdotes you'd like to share, we're always interested in hearing how things went, and also what suggestions people might have for making it better, please contact us at our email, info@propagandagame.org. We're always happy to hear feedback from users. Thank you very much for this.